Welcome everyone to the flipped lesson regarding the background material to Dante's Inferno. I want to explain a little bit about what this flipped lesson is and what it means and what is expected of you. We do such a good job in class with our discussion and our application of the material, and oftentimes, especially when we transition to a new unit or a new text, we have to stop, do some background study and introductory material before we can really kind of dive in and fully understand a text. You should never read a text without knowing important background of the author, the time period that it's written, and the purpose for it being written. So in essence then, this is the assignment for that. I want to flip class and to move what would typically be a lecture and would take up a great deal of class, if not an entire class period. I want to move it to this kind of homework setting for you to have some one-on-one time with me and the material to absorb it to the best ability that you can, so then when you come to class on the day that this is due, we can dive right in reading and understanding the material. So it's a new trend that seems to be catching on. I've tried it in another class already, and it's had huge success and saved a lot of time. So here's what you need to do. Is not only just watch this presentation, but you need to closely listen to everything that I'm saying. Since this is a video, you can stop it whenever you may need if you're going to take notes and you want to kind of re-listen to something that I said. If I'm talking too fast or there's a lot of material on the screen, you can pause it, kind of catch back up, rewind it, rewatch a certain part that was confusing to you or that you may have missed. And since this is on the internet, you can watch it whenever that you need to. So you can watch it several times before coming into class. Watch it again during our study and at the end before a test or any time that you may need this background information in your writing, in your reading, or in your study. Now, it is expected of you to fully absorb and understand this material, so I encourage you to watch it more than once, to take notes, because you will be held accountable when you come into class. So, if all of this is clear, I want to go ahead and kind of start on this material and just talk to you a little bit about your author. It's very important not only just to study the author of a text, but this text primarily. It is very complicated, it is very thorough, and it has a lot embedded within it. And there's a lot behind it that's driving why it's being written. So this first slide is going to kind of talk about this outside influence on the author Dante's life and the different kinds of things we'll talk about once we read the text together. Little is known about Dante's youth, but the first 38 years of his life in Florence, Italy was an important influence on his political and cultural career. A lot of usual background information that we get about people, like family and school, etc., we don't really get that with Dante. However, there are a few critical elements that we need to kind of explore. The first I've mentioned here is Florence, Italy. It is his birthplace, where he was born and raised, where he did go to school. He married a woman named Gemma, and there's another name up here named Beatrice. Dante met Beatrice when he was 9 years old, and she came in and out of his life continually for many years. And she was widely known as the love of his life, and thus a huge influence on him and his writing. He wrote many poems and odes and sonnets dedicated to her, but married a woman named Gemma, and Beatrice went on to marry another man. However, they eventually did marry, and Beatrice became Dante's second wife, and further played an influential role in his life. Dante never writes about his first wife, Gemma. He writes about Beatrice before they get together, while they're married, and then, of course, the heartbreak that he ensued after her death. I mentioned already Florence. This text that we're about to study is called an allegory, and I'll get to what that term means in a little bit. But there's a purpose in Dante's writing here, and it comes a lot from Florence and him eventually being exiled permanently. In the early 1300s, Dante was exiled for his political affiliation. There's a lot of background here, but here's the important meat of it. Dante's party, the White Guelphs, wanted more freedom from Rome, while the opposing side, the Black Guelphs, supported the Pope. And that kind of idea of running and understanding a country and that overarching guidance then that a Pope would give to Rome. So after lots of strife, Dante was exiled from Florence because of this affiliation and the many incidences that arose from this split party. It was this act of exile, the treatment he received because of it, and the impact that this had on his life afterwards that all worked together to base many of the reasons and conversations of his exploration through hell and inferno that we'll study. He attempted to try to come to terms with the world around him that he didn't understand and that he no longer fully belonged. He was kicked out of his hometown and never allowed to come back again. And it was during this exile then that he wrote the Divine Comedy. So all of this background information had a huge influence on his career, shaped him to become the person that he was, the ups and the downs of his life. And I've mentioned the name, the Divine Comedy. Inferno is one part of it. The entire piece together is called the Divine Comedy. And it is known as the world's most illustrious piece of world literature. It has hugely influenced. All allegories written today come from the structure and the success of the Divine Comedy, written here in the earliest 14th century. So over 700 years or around later, it is still being taught, obviously, and is still hugely influential. People and students are often curious why the text is called a comedy, because there's no true humor in it. But the term comedy in the classical sense refers to a piece of writing whose ending reflects an ultimate good or order in the universe. So, in the Divine Comedy, Dante's progression at the start in hell, all the way through paradise, going from this moral confusion to this clear vision of God, is then the expression of the classical term comedy. Starts here when things are chaotic, and it's through this progression and this in-depth personal thought then that things receive their order. Dante makes it to a clear end, and thus you have the Divine Comedy. Now, the organization of it, it is first and foremost an epic poem. An epic poem is a long poem, obviously, a long text that explores the trials and obstacles of an epic hero. So it's not a novel, it is not a book, it is not a play, it is a huge, huge, huge epic poem over 1,400 lines long and broken into the three parts. Now, where a novel would have a chapter, the Divine Comedy has what's called a canto. And Inferno is 33 cantos plus an introductory one, 34. So there are 100 canti total. Each division has 33. We've talked a little bit already in class about the number 3 symbolism, and we will definitely, hopefully you see it in front of you already jumping out, but it's something we'll talk about together. And we're just going to study Inferno. We won't look at Purgatory or Paradise. We'll talk about how they pick up the structure and purpose that the Inferno starts, but we will not read them together. Now, it is written in what's called terza rima poetic style here in hendectasyllables, lines of 11 syllables. Lots of terminology there, but the important part that I want you to understand, not so much is the terza rima, but it's this term right here, tercets. The tercet is a 3 lines of poem, so there's a stanza that has 3 lines in it, then a break, and another stanza that has 3 lines, a break, and so on, so on. And the rhyme scheme is set in ABA, BCB, CDC, and then repeats or continues in that formula once the next tercet stanza starts. Now, because it was originally written in Italian, and we're reading, obviously, the English translation, the rhyme is sometimes thrown off because of the syntax and the word choice, having to switch it up to kind of keep the content, so the rhyme sometimes is lost in it, but we will look at this specific rhyme scheme. Hell has 9 circles that Dante and us, his readers, will venture through. Purgatory has 7 terraces, and Paradise has 9 spheres floating around here. So it's just this part right here, the 9 circles of hell that we will venture through. So, key terminology to take away from this. Epic poem, 3 divisions, each with 33 cantos, terza rima style, tercet structure, and with your rhyme scheme. Got it? I hope so. Now, with all of this kind of organization in mind here, let's talk a little bit specifically about what we will be looking at with the Inferno. I mentioned that hell has 9 circles. Here is what each circle explores. Now there's 33 cantos once we get past the introduction. And so obviously multiple cantos deal with the same circle. Dante explores the 7 deadly sins across these 9 circles as he ventures in through hell. Now, we'll start here at limbo and the gates of hell, going into lust and gluttony and greed and wrath and heresy and violence. And then you can see that the circle 7 is broken up into 3 subcircles of violence. Violence against others, violence against yourself, and then violence against God. Then you have the fraudulent, and you have treachery. Treachery to Dante is seen as the worst sins, and with his religion as well, the worst sins of all, of betrayal and pride. And thus, in the very bottom of hell, in circle 9, is Satan, who betrayed the trust of God, is thus the epitome and the symbol of evil, and resides there in circle 9. Now let me make this point now, and I'll make it several times. We're not looking at the Inferno as a religious text. Yes, it is talking about hell, a religious topic. What we're going to see and study in this is not what's supposed to be associated as what the understood place of hell, according to some religions, will be looking like. We're not going to, discuss religious beliefs, religious faiths, ours or the author's himself, but looking this primarily as an act of symbolism. It is dripping with symbolism all the way through. And what I'll have in class as we go through is more explanation about each of these circles as we venture through them. So don't worry about all of this text